This video was developed by the Tennessee Integrated Food Safety Center of Excellence.
Welcome to the 3 phases of effective interviewing. In this video, you'll learn the fundamental skills and techniques for conducting effective interviews during foodborne illness investigations. What does an effective interview look like? Better yet, what does an ineffective interview look like?
Hello?
Hi, I'm calling from the Lake County Health Department. Public health authorities are working to identify causes of enteric disease in the community so we can prevent additional cases. Part of this process involves interviewing people who have recently been ill with an enteric illness so we can do analysis for common exposures. May I please speak with Luke Johnson?
This is Luke Johnson. I'm sorry, who are you again?
I'm from the health department. Did you recently experience diarrhea?
I don't really want to talk about that right now. Also, I'm kind of in the middle of something.
This should only take about 20 minutes, and I need to ask you some questions about your diet and activities before the diarrhea started.
Yeah, I don't have time or interest, but thank you anyway.
Conducting an effective interview is both an art and a science. Interviewees have often recovered by the time the interview occurs and may no longer be thinking about their illness. Also, the interviewee's perspective, the request for an interview by a government official comes seemingly out of the blue. To make a successful interview more likely and avoid the situation we just witnessed, there are 3 phases that interviewers should consider. 1, preparing for the interview. 2, conducting the interview. And 3, finishing the interview. Attention to these 3 phases of the interview process will increase the likelihood of successful interviewing and in turn help identify the exposures causing illness and prevent additional illnesses. Let's start by learning how to prepare for an interview. The interview process begins long before contacting the case. The interviewer needs to have a clear understanding of why the interview is important so they can communicate that to the case. The interviewer also needs to be familiar with the pathogen causing illness, if known, so they will be prepared to answer questions the case may have and provide education to prevent further spread. The interviewer needs to be well-versed in the questionnaire being used to avoid confusion and improve flow. Finally, the interviewer needs to have a plan for special situations that may arise during the interview, such as the need for translation services and considerations for cases under 18 years of age. First, let's review why case and outbreak interviewing is so important. Understanding this and being able to convey it to the interviewee will be critical to encouraging cooperation. The reason we interview people with enteric illnesses, which are sometimes referred to as foodborne illnesses, and are illnesses that affect the gastrointestinal tract, such as vomiting and diarrhea, is to identify the source of the illness and prevent others in the community from becoming ill. Interviewing people with the same illness allows us to see commonalities in foods they've eaten, places they've been, and other trends. Once a commonality is identified as a potential source of illness, public health authorities can take actions to protect the community, such as removing contaminated food from the market. Avoid jargon and explain this in simple language to the case. Sometimes we need to interview healthy people to better understand what made others sick. These healthy people are often referred to as controls. These interviews are often more challenging because it may be difficult for the healthy people to understand why they are being interviewed. We interview well people so we can compare their exposures, such as foods they ate or places they attended, to those of sick people, and hopefully identify what the sick people did that the well people did not, that may have led to illness. Next, you will need to understand the basics about the pathogen-causing illness, including the way it is spread, common symptoms, and how people can protect their loved ones from becoming infected. Several good references for this information include the Red Book, Control of Communicable Diseases Manual, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website. Also, review the exclusion criteria for childcare facilities and high-risk occupations like food handling for your jurisdiction in case you identify a case who needs to be excluded. It is best to ask your supervisor how to handle these situations. Finally, spend some time carefully reviewing the questionnaire you will be using prior to contacting the case. Make sure you understand all the questions and why they are being asked. There may be words that are unfamiliar or difficult to pronounce on the questionnaire, and you will want to ask for clarification before you begin interviewing. The questionnaire being used will differ depending on the type of investigation being conducted. For example, a routine enteric disease case is likely to be interviewed with the case report form per your jurisdiction's protocols as part of routine surveillance, while a case of unknown enteric illness suspected to be part of an outbreak will likely be interviewed with an outbreak questionnaire. Outbreak questionnaires may have outbreak-specific questions tailored for the situation at hand. Sometimes you may be asked to interview a case suspected to be part of a multi-state outbreak with a national questionnaire. Interviewers may also be asked to re-interview cases with specific questionnaires aimed at collecting additional details about specific exposures. If possible, ask a more experienced coworker if you can observe them interview a case so you can hear the flow in a realistic situation. Once you have reviewed these items and feel ready to contact your case for an interview, look and see if there's any existing information about the case in the disease surveillance system or foodborne illness complaint log. You may find helpful information such as the name of the healthcare provider who reported the case, specimen collection date, laboratory results, reported symptoms, onset dates of the symptoms, and other helpful notes. Reviewing this data beforehand will not only help you familiarize yourself with the case, but also help you develop your interview strategy. It is important to find a quiet place to conduct the interview. This not only helps you as the interviewer to better listen and record responses, but also helps maintain confidentiality. In general, useful resources to have on hand before starting the interview include a calendar to help record dates accurately and spark the case's memory about special events, a paper copy of the questionnaire, even if you are completing it electronically, in case your computer system fails, any relevant notes about the case you've collected from surveillance data, a headset to allow you to have both hands free, multiple writing utensils, and your disease reference materials in case you need to look something up during the interview. There may be times that you will not be conducting an interview via phone, but rather in person. This is not common, but may happen during outbreaks or when the case lives in a congregate setting. If the interview occurs in person, make sure you have organized the tools and resources you will need to complete the interview. Finally, there are some cases for which you may need to account for special considerations, which commonly include cases under the age of 18 and non-English speaking cases. When a case is under the age of 18, you will need to interview the parent or guardian, or depending on your jurisdiction's protocols, may need to ask for parental permission to interview the minor. Check with your supervisor for protocols regarding interviewing minors in your jurisdiction. Additionally, if the child is a student who consumes school lunch, many school districts publish menus online, and this may provide an excellent resource to assist recall. Asking the parent to have the minor available to add details regarding exposures may also be helpful. In cases where the potential interviewee doesn't speak English, use the health department's phone interpreter services for telephone interviews, or language interpretation services for in-person interviews. Even if you are relatively fluent in a language, it is recommended to use these professional services to ensure quality translation of information. Likewise, do not depend on the interviewee's family members to translate. Be sure to schedule the language services in advance of the interview. As they say, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So following these preparation steps and tips will make sure your interviews are all successful. Now that we've learned about preparing for interviews, let's look at what is needed to successfully conduct an interview. Conducting effective interviews requires a unique blend of social skill and attention to detail. Here, we'll explore considerations and practices that will lead to effective and successful interviewing. It is important to remember that you set the tone for the entire interview, and that first impression may very well impact cooperation. Additionally, most people are hesitant when they receive an unexpected phone call. You likely have only a few seconds to encourage the case to participate in the interview. A solid introduction that states who you are and why you're calling is key. The interviewer also needs to succinctly convey why the interview is important so that the interviewee will understand how the information will be used to prevent additional illness. Your demeanor and conduct during an interview are critical. Interviewing requires that we employ social skill and empathy early in the conversation in order to gain trust. Remember that interviews are a dialogue, not a monologue, so it is important to be conversational and not read strictly from a script during the introduction. Having a bulleted checklist is advised to help you sound more natural. A conversational tone will help build rapport with the interviewee and lead to successful interviewing results. Do you remember our ineffective interview from phase 1? Let's see if we can improve that interaction.
Hello?
Hi, I'm Jane Sully, and I'm calling from the Lake County Health Department. May I please speak with Luke Johnson?
Yeah, this is Luke Johnson. I'm sorry, who are you again?
I'm a nurse with the health department. We've had several people in the community sick with E. coli lately, and we're calling them to try and figure out what might be causing these illnesses so we can hopefully prevent more illnesses. Were you recently ill?
I was, and it was really, really bad.
I'm sorry to hear that. How are you feeling now?
Much better. I don't think I've ever been that sick in my life.
I'm glad you're doing better, and sorry you went through that. I'd love to ask you some questions about foods you ate and places you went before you got sick to compare with other people's answers who had the same illness. It could help us prevent more people from getting sick. Would that be okay?
Oh, yeah. How long will it take?
Probably about 20 minutes or so, but if you need to stop at some point, we can set a time to finish later.
Sounds good.
Now that you have a willing interviewee, it's time to start the interview. Follow the questionnaire you've been asked to use and don't skip questions unless you've been instructed to do so. Be sure to manage your time well so you can finish everything and respect the interviewee's time. Since your overall goal in interviewing is to identify exposures that may be causing illness, it is critically important that you ask about exposures during the correct time period. The illness onset date and time dictates the exposure window of interest, and it is highly important to accurately record this detail. Help the case remember the onset time as precisely as possible by using a calendar or referring to routine activities that might help jog their memories. Once you've determined the exposure window of interest, remind the interviewee of those dates as you ask about exposures. An interview cannot be successful if the necessary information isn't acquired, so be sure to collect all the needed data. Record details that the interviewee provides. Write in the questionnaire margins if there isn't a spot for the data. Sometimes outbreaks have been solved by data recorded in the page margins. Interviews are an intricate balance of asking about a wide variety of exposures and getting details such as brand, packaging type, and the times and locations of the most relevant items. It's not possible to collect every detail of a wide variety of exposures without the interview running very long and both the interviewer and interviewee experiencing fatigue. In general, an enteric case report form will focus on the most likely exposures of interest and direct the interviewer regarding the level of detail desired. During outbreak interviewing, there may be an initial interview that aims to ask about a wide variety of exposures at a relatively shallow level, sometimes called a shotgun approach, in order to generate a hypothesis. After one or more hypotheses are generated, a follow-up interview may be done to dig deeper into the details of the exposures of interest. The questionnaire should be clear regarding what details to collect, but if you aren't certain, ask your supervisor. Many cases will have trouble remembering what they've eaten recently, let alone what they may have eaten weeks or months ago. To assist them, try prompting their memory by having them look at a calendar to recall any events that may have impacted their diet, such as a weekly church supper or the drive-thru they frequent after youth sports practice. It may also help to identify anything unusual that happened that week, such as hosting out-of-town guests or attending a wedding. Cases may also be able to glance at their online bank statement or photos to recall the time period of interest. Finally, be sure to get complete information about grocery stores and other locations where the interviewee purchases food. Sometimes shopping at a common store is the commonality between cases. Asking if the interviewee uses store loyalty cards or online grocery delivery services can also be a valuable source of detailed information, should it be needed later. Sometimes an interviewee's responses will cause confusion or not be given as anticipated, and the interviewer needs to remain able to pivot. For example, responses may not fall in sequence with your questioning, but they may be answering other questions as they speak. Listen closely and be flexible. If you need to skip around the questionnaire to better fit the interview, do it. Just be sure that you ask each question on the questionnaire and record the answers. Questions and answers do not have to be ascertained in a chronological or linear fashion. Also, as you interview, be sure to stay neutral and non-judgmental about the questions the case may have or the answers they may provide. You may not agree with all of their opinions or reported exposures, but remember that your role is to accurately record the responses and not judge the interviewee. There may also be times that you note inconsistencies or are confused by their response, just as a case who reports they never eat chicken but later refers to eating a chicken sandwich in a restaurant. You will need to clarify the inconsistent information provided. In the end, make sure that the data you've collected makes sense. If you have any questions about any response, always ask for clarification. Sometimes challenges will arise during the interview. One of the most common challenges is when an interviewee gets off topic or rambles. It is important that you gently redirect the interviewee back to the task at hand. Be polite and respectful, but try to circle back to the questionnaire. You may also encounter cases who are resistant to offer information because they perceive information shared will get a local establishment in trouble with the health department. Clarify the importance of pinpointing the source of the illness and that the intent is not punitive, rather protective for the community. Finally, some interview topics may be awkward and the interviewee may feel uncomfortable. It is best to build trust and rapport before getting to any sensitive topics. Once you've conducted the interview, it's time to wrap it up. Let's take a look at how to finish the interview. After you've asked all your questions and recorded the details, there are a few steps to remember to be sure you finish strong. The first step in finishing the interview is to scan your report form to make sure you filled out all of the required fields and didn't miss any key questions. Do this before you hang up with the interviewee so that you can ask any outstanding questions. If the interviewee reports others ill, it is important to obtain the name and contact information for those individuals. If such information is obtained, the interviewer should speak with their supervisor to discuss next steps. Once you've confirmed that the report form is complete, you can conclude your conversation. Be sure to ask for permission to call back should you need to follow up with something or need further information, and inform them how their information will be used in your investigation. You may want to ask if this is the best method of contact. Be sure to end the conversation by thanking them sincerely for taking the time to complete the interview before saying goodbye. Immediately after you've concluded your conversation, you need to review the case report while the content of the interview is still fresh in your mind. Add any notes that you may have taken during the conversation that are not included on the form, and clean up any notes that may have been crossed out, erased, or written erroneously. This will ensure that the form is as accurate and easy to interpret as possible. After you've reviewed and annotated the form appropriately, follow your organization's steps for documentation. For some, you may be required to submit the form to a supervisor or other staff member for review and entry into a database or surveillance system. For others, you may be responsible for entering information into a surveillance system or other database. Whichever scenario applies to you, the important thing to remember is that this information needs to get processed so that it can be reviewed in conjunction with other similar cases. The sooner this is done following an interview, the better. As you've seen, interviews are a complex procedure with many considerations. Proper planning, maintaining a conversational tone, carefully documenting responses to questions, and properly concluding the interview will help ensure that your interviews are positive and effective methods of preventing enteric disease.